Continuing our conversation here on News Talk with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. We will segue and talk about other things, but I want to follow up on what we were talking about in the last segment. We were talking about the comments that Ron Machin made in a press conference. The U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Ron Machin, made in March of 2014 as Vince Gray was battling for renomination against the eventual winner, Muriel Bowser, and a host of other Democrats right before the Democratic primary. We carried that live. It was a remarkable set of remarks in that while it was fascinating to get his thoughts on the matter, you would think that a prosecutor would do his speaking, as it were, in the form of an indictment, not as a pundit or in a press conference. Colby King and others raised the point now. What was Vince Gray's opportunity to confront his accuser?
Well, he obviously never had it, and I'm sure he never wanted it.
But is there something fundamentally unfair about how this all unfolded?
It certainly has the appearance of unfairness. The U.S. Attorney must have thought that he had it in the bag, but as he continued, remember Vince had very good counsel. He was never able, before he resigned, to go where he said he was going to go, and who took the hit was Vince Gray. And Vince Gray has every reason to wonder, what in the world were you doing? Why didn't you wait? So that it is unusual for a U.S. Attorney to speak just before an election, but I just told you what the Attorney General said. And I don't have anything to go on as an objective course except the Attorney General of the United States. And I do say that I would imagine that the Justice Department knew that this was going to happen. And if so, they may have decided that the U.S. Attorney was put in a tough spot if he withheld it. And let's say 2 weeks after the election, he came forward with it. Again, I'm only guessing. How do I know? But I don't want people to think that this was a very easy slam dunk if, in fact, the case became ripe just before an election.
But don't you hold out the notion that we should have a better system than one in which the government can, through innuendo, and I understand.
Well, look, I've already said the government's position usually is not to, as you come on to an election, to say anything at all, and that's whether you're a DA in a state or the U.S. Attorney. The U.S. Attorney decided to go forward, and the reason he is given is the very same reason that the Attorney General gave, and since I don't know anything further, I just think that that's all that can be said about that.
There was a ruling not too long ago about the District of Columbia's gun regulations that was made by a visiting judge, and we've just had a new appeal ruling involving that case, and the fact that you had someone who had been brought in to help clear the caseload weigh in on such a significant matter.
Well, I was very pleased about the ruling, but the reason for it wasn't the very best. It was that he had, quote, overstayed his welcome. I hate it when, with all that I have gone to, because I have been given senatorial courtesy to get judges who live here. This was a judge who didn't live here, was brought in to deal with the backlog. He overstayed his term, and the Court of Appeals found he did not have the authority to issue that opinion that said that our police chief can decide if there's good cause to carry a concealed weapon. But here's my prediction. Our prediction that the D.C. law will continue to prevail because there have been a couple of other laws like this which have, in fact, gone all the way to courts of appeals and have prevailed.
Great news for the region in the spending bill that the House and Senate just authorized, because full funding for Metro is included.
Among many other things, and we had to struggle to get that full funding because first there was a 50%, then there was a 50 million, then there was 25 million. Now we have the full 150 million for the 8th straight year, coming at a very important time for Metro when it has had a 5% loss of its riders. I was the ranking member, the so-called, of the Big Four that wrote the bill, was very intent on getting that done, and was intent on getting what is really new money, an increase in Metro, for example, a increase in transit almost a 25% increase in transit, because I was able to get us included in those who are considered urban, older, have older systems. That gave us some extra money. There's a 25% increase for transit, a 10% increase for roads and bridges. This is the first really bipartisan omnibus bill we've had in a long time. You got a new speaker, Paul Ryan, that we worked with, but who really did it was the Republican Senate, who I negotiated with, and our allies, Democratic allies in the Senate and the House.
Can you talk about some of the other provisions of this bill that you consider highlights?
Oh my goodness, the greatest one perhaps for all those D.C. students and families out there is a $10 million increase in D.C. tag. This is the bill that has doubled our college attendance. I got it when there was a Republican president and a Republican House and Senate, but we've had some struggle making sure we stayed at least at 30%, and one we did was to get an increase. 30 million, got an increase at 40 million. No shutdown for the third time. Of course, we weren't going to be shut down anytime. Anyway, this time that was record funding, greater funding for the District of Columbia than at any time since I have been in the Congress.
What swayed them to the value of the program and the use of those monies in this way? The
record. Most of these students are very important to the District of Columbia, because when they come home with college degrees, they can get jobs. 80% of them come home. The great majority of them graduate. So it's been one of those great successful programs of the federal government that's proved itself, and that's why we continue to get the funding.
What did you take away from this process as everyone's wondering, okay, what's Paul Ryan going to be like in this new role, and how much leash, so to speak, will he get from his caucus when some are with him on a given issue, but not everyone is with him?
Well, they gave him a lot of slack. Of course, he comes from a time when there were bills like this. I think Paul Ryan was thinking, well, you know what, we're coming up to a election year, presidential election year. He and McConnell, frankly, were thinking now that they have an all-Republican House and Senate, they look very bad if there's a shutdown or if they can't get through a bipartisan bill, because the Democrats are really going to attack them if they don't, since they control everything except the presidency.
Eleanor Holmes Norton represents the District of Columbia on Capitol Hill, part senator, part House member, part senator, it would seem. Thank you very much for your time. Happy holidays. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Good having you here. When we return, the new chairman of the Donald Trump for President campaign in Virginia.